There are different methods for the creation of a company. Many times we have the necessary tools to create it, but it is difficult. With the passing of time, the market conditions and the needs that it offers can open more possibilities. Let's know how a producer opened a field in an unknown market. How has been his process and the benefits and difficulties that he has encountered along the way. In my mind, when I bought this farm, I did not have the production of fertilizers from the earthworm in mind. In a talk with the Umada, they asked me if I wanted the farm to be a pilot in some earthworm crops that were going to be established. I said that they have no problem, and indeed a demonstration bed was mounted. The purpose was to cultivate here the village in production of organic fertilizers. But it did not work. I made 2 calls, and the first came a family and the second did not come to any. I informed the Umada that the attempt was unsuccessful and that they would withdraw their names. They did not answer me. They are not their property. Look what you do with them. Well, I left them there every time I went up there. I turned that food over, I poured water on it, and I saw that they multiplied, and little by little I grew from a bed of 1 meter by 10 that they told me that the Umada installed me. They did everything very well, and with time, I do not know how much, it says another bed and then another bed and then another one with 5 beds. Initially I had this part in masonry that I built under my ideas, because here everything I do is my initiative. I have read and I have gone to several seminars where they talk about some organic, not so much of worms but of organic fertilizers, and I have seen the importance and the future that they have, and then I was encouraged, and thank God I have managed to bring the name and cultivation to the point that it is. And I kept it as a hobby. Then I took that solid, because initially it was only solid that I took out, and I threw it to some of the crops that I had, and I saw the results, and immediately the change was noticeable. I was encouraged. Suddenly in the year 10 of the 22 that I have been with worms, I became more interested in the crop, and I grew, and from 2010 to here I looked at it not as a hobby. I started to get the producer's registration, then the ICA sales registration, and I started to organize this worm farm. I have done it 3 times. Twice it was knocked down by the wind and plastic. Now, thanks to God, I managed to do it in a metallic structure, and I think it will last us for a long time. I had to send a cart to bring the food for the worms, and I had to have the butler with a time schedule so that he could dispose of the food at the right time to check the humidity, the temperature, and the amount of food. Then it was taking a different direction, and that hobby had to be given a different direction. That is where I started as a company. Vermiculture is a technique based on the intensive breeding of earthworms. Thanks to their complete digestive system, the organic material they consume undergoes a process of fractionation, splitting, synthesis, enzymatic and microbial enrichment, which results in a fast degradation, giving as a final result an excellent product. In this way, the earthworm is taken as a work tool thanks to its natural capacity to generate a clean and efficient fertilizer. Consequently, many people have taken advantage of the benefits they offer to undertake and carry out small businesses, facing the adversities that this competitive market brings. These beds were the first to be built all in masonry. Each bed has an initial slope of 25 degrees there, and internally it has the shape of a trough, and in the center it has a totally perforated tube protected with double poly shade so that only the liquid passes through and not even the soil passes through. Water is applied and until the block comes out. The whole batch that is being considered for sale goes through the laboratory to check that the technical data sheet is in the product. If the data sheet is not completed, it is guaranteed. I have had a teacher who taught me, no. It has been empirically. My knowledge is here. Trial and error. It is a very good fertilizer, very efficient because the technical data sheet is very benevolent. 51 grams of phosphorus, 39 grams of potassium, 26 grams of nitrogen, 21 grams of carbon, 3.5 grams of calcium. In addition to the humic and fulvic acids and other nutrients that are generated in the natural biochemical process of the earthworm, which makes it a very complete fertilizer. In one of the parts where it was a little hard for me was to balance the food so that the compost would come out with a technical data sheet similar to the one I have to guarantee. So I was able to select the food that I am going to bring here at the wholesaler. At the market, I already have 2 people who look at sources of phosphorus, sources of potassium, sources of carbon, sources of nitrogen, and that's how I bring sources of potassium. I bring tomatoes, strawberries, carrots, as sources of phosphorus, eggplants, parsley, cabbage, mushrooms. I call them mushrooms because they are discarded from the warehouses. No way I am going to buy the mushroom at 8 or 10,000 because I would think that the worms would not give me, but then they are bought cheaply. The returns are brought and applied to the crop as sources of carbon. The peels of passion fruit, pineapple, peas, beans as sources of nitrogen, lettuce, broccoli, cauliflower. Calcium is in all the food that is brought in and the other nutrients that the compost comes with. In addition to the organic part that is brought in, the plaza is fed with 30%, 40% is a kinase, which is the living part of the bona, the microorganisms that provide a kinase which, speaking of manure, is the healthiest. It is the one that brings the least bacteria that can cause damage to the worms or to the crops. Music. In a book that I read a while ago, it said that the best fertilizer that was produced was wasted was the liquid, that all the nutrients were there, that it was a mistaken thought that the best fertilizer was the solid. The truth is very good, but the liquid fulfills one function and the solid fulfills another. The solid serves to recover and maintain soils, of course. That topsoil that we have been using up over time, because here in Colombia we have an economy of extraction. Take from the soil and we do not give anything back. That is why we have been finishing with that topsoil, and in very arid and dry places it is difficult to produce. So what the earthworm humus does is to recover those soils, and in others that are not so bad, to sustain them. More than 200 species of earthworms are known, and most of them are very productive. But the most productive is the Californian red worm, the most efficient in captivity, the one that produces the most, the one that eats the most, the one that multiplies the easiest. The more humid the compost is, the more it will eat, the more it will produce. The adult earthworm, when it shows us this lens and this ring, indicates that it is an adult earthworm that can reproduce. The earthworm is hermaphroditic. If it has a male it reproduces, but it also reproduces alone. That is another advantage of the earthworm. When we talk about earthworms, apparently it seems very easy to not leave them visible with them. Because the truth is it is not difficult, but the earthworm, I compare it to a baby. Despite being a primary form of life, they need care so that the worm culture works well. It is necessary to regulate the humidity so that the compost has 80%. The food has a temperature that does not exceed 27 degrees Celsius. That it does not exceed 27 degrees Celsius, that it does not go down from 18 ideal 21, that it has an amount of food that the worm can process it, and a pH between 6 and 7 preferable, that it goes up more than 7, that it goes down 6 if it is very acid, neither when eating nor the worm does not consume, it does not digest. And it is necessary to take care of the alkaline food, because the lime, if it is very alkaline, affects the worm, is delicate, but if you manage those 4 items, you have worms working, reproducing. The bed can be built in various dimensions of 1.50 meters wide by 40 centimeters deep, and the length is determined by the space that the farmer has. It can be 5 meters, 7 meters, 10 meters. I have to make 20 meters long. I have beds of 8 meters. I have beds of 10 meters. You can build it 1 meter wide, and the material, there are many and very varied. You can do it in gourd, can do it in cane. You can do it in board, as these are built, and with canvases with some slopes so that the liquid flows and collects it in one of the corners. And then you can take advantage of both the liquid and the solid that the bed produces, and it multiplies little by little. If you have a way to build it in masonry, the measures are the same, 40 centimeters high, which is equivalent to 2 blocks of masonry. The width can be 1 with 50, can be 1 with 20, because there is no specific measure for the chamber to work, as it will work as long as you make a road with an internal slope to the bed. You put a perforated tube protected with a membrane with a poly shadow, and it will collect the liquid in a corner, as it will take advantage of both liquid and solid. Is a matter of dedicating a little, but there is no difficulty. But let's look at the worm seed. You can look at these parts that look like soil, Effectively it is fertile earthworm and solid. Here the worm has already consumed all the food. It is asking for food, what I was explaining to you now. It says when it needs food, because if we put food where there is food, then it leaves the one that is processing and goes to the new one, and with the aggravation that the part of the food that was not processed decomposes and generates bad odors in the bed. This is the compost, and we find the worms. As you can see out there, we can see the worms working. They are finishing cleaning what they have there. The echinase from the study is the purest, the one that brings the least bacteria, and above all those that are the most negative, which are the ones that affect the worm or the crop where it is applied. With all the sawdust it creates a problem in the oxygen-breathing bed, and then finally the worm can kill me because of the lack of oxygen. So I pay that they pick me up at the trough, and they always go with a handful of horse manure and fill my marbles. I pay 1,200 pesos for the cost of what I was telling you in the transportation. So I go back, and that's why this is already looked at as a company. And we are going to look at a bed that is about to be harvested soon. This bed, the earthworm in this bed is getting deeper and deeper, because it is looking at the light, and secondly it is looking for where to eat. When there is no more on the surface, it is looking for where to eat. Here we see solid humus, and the earthworm has been getting deeper and deeper. But if we come closer here, we see the same amount or more earthworm accumulated there. And the great characteristic of great name is that it is an adult earthworm, and this helps a lot in the reproduction. The bed is ready to cultivate. What do we do to get the fertilizer? We trap. We put some baskets with a perforated bottom with echinase, and they go into the baskets, and after 3 days and 4 days the worm has already climbed into the baskets to eat, and the baskets are removed. If one sees that in the bed there are still a lot of names left, it returns and traps them. Now we have a new system, which is with sacks in which the potato is packed, then the sacks are spread out. The echinase is put in, and the worm goes up and is taken out. It seems that the sack is more efficient than the more functional basket. As you can see, the amount of worms is interesting. Of worms, because it is interesting to see this bed approximately. It is going to be trapped to collect the compost. I was telling you a moment ago that the normal trap system has been until the whole surface of the bed is filled with perforated baskets. At the bottom half of the worm goes to look for the echinase, to look for its food, and after 3 or 4 days one removes the baskets. The worm goes to look for the echinase. For days, one removes the baskets with the worm seed and deposits them in another bed for the time being. After you have removed all the seed, then remove the compost. The compost goes into the drying chamber immediately. You put a layer of 10-15 centimeters here in this bed, and the earthworm that you took out, you put it back in the same day you take it out. Or you don't take it out immediately, you put the layer of 10-15 centimeters of echinase and put the seed back in the same day, and leave it still for 15 to 20 days for the earthworm to de-stress and acclimatize. And start feeding it. 20 days that the earthworm again is de-stressed, is acclimatized, and already you begin to feed it, begins to eat, you will see that it is normal that the first 8 days in a row is still dormant, is not lacking with the humidity. I don't know what the 4 items are, I don't know. Don't forget the humidity, pH, temperature, and amount of food. When I talk about 80% humidity, it's the compost. Choose any handful. I gently squeeze the worms and the compost, and look here. I squeeze gently and I should get a few drops. Look here, I get a few drops between my fingers that indicate that it has the necessary humidity for it to work. If I don't get the drops, it's very dry. If I get the drops immediately, it has a lot of humidity. This mill is the particle separator of the drying bed. This mill is turning through the energy that a 2 horsepower motor has. The mill turns in its rotation here, and it goes by gravity. And the compost goes down here. There is a device that collects the compost since it is going to be packaged. And on this side the second grade compost is selected. The impurities are removed and it can be used on the farm or sold as compost. What I have concluded from the analysis that I have reached is that we can manage a clean production with 60% organic and 40% agrochemicals, and everyone will be fine. The tree will be fertile, the harvest will be good, and we are finishing the soil. But not 100% agrochemicals and nothing in organic. What I was telling you a moment ago, we are finishing with the topsoil. I hope that in the near future there will be more awareness, and the two will be combined, and we will have a balance. Because the damage is so great and the ecosystem is totally damaged. Vermiculture is a good alternative for dealing with contamination through the cleaning of organic waste from the soil, since earthworms convert this waste into fertilizer, which is a great help for the recovery of soils that have suffered the consequences of the excessive use of chemical fertilizers.